Yeah, so I'm in San Bruno right now. This is where I live, and I was at home doing some work just a short time ago, and I started to feel kind of an earthquake, just like a small one, and then there was a pause, and then it came back, and it was probably shaking for 10 seconds or so, and it wasn't dramatic shaking. It wasn't like I've felt earthquakes at home that were like the house really shook around. This was almost like literally like more of a stir, like the ground was just sort of stirring is the best word I can come up for it. And it lasted about 10 seconds. And usually, you know, when you get those quakes that last longer than just an initial hit, you know somewhere it's probably bigger and more powerful. And we're sort of seeing now that it hit down in Santa Clara County, as Rudy was saying. And I was just looking at the USGS map. They have a kind of a latest earthquake map that shows where these things happen. And it kind of looks like, from what I can tell, and this isn't official, but it kind of looks like it hit either on or very close to the Hayward Fault, which of course is the fault line that they really worry about here in California around the Bay Area for possibly one day being the, the source of a very big earthquake. So whenever there's an earthquake on that fault, they keep a close eye on those. I did not feel there was some mention of sort of an aftershock later on. I did not feel that. I only felt the initial earthquake, and you could tell that when it goes past 10 seconds or so, that it's really something you got to kind of keep an eye on. Went onto social media, and it looks like a lot of people felt it, not just me.
Definitely. Most of us here in the newsroom, like I said, aside from Kyla, most of us here in the newsroom did end up feeling that. Charles, thank you. We do want to get to Richard Allen. He's the director of the Berkeley Seismology Lab, joining us over the phone now. Richard, this is a pretty big earthquake, 5.1.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is a pretty big earthquake, and of course it was just south of the Bay Area, so clearly many people across the Bay Area felt it. Also, I'm very pleased to be able to report that the earthquake early warning system successfully sent out a warning across the Bay Area as well. I'm getting lots of messages, actually, from people who got the alert and then actually felt the shaking. So in terms of getting a warning out to people so they could sort of protect themselves before they felt the shaking, it looks like we did a pretty good job.
Well, definitely. For me, I actually didn't get an alert personally, but I do believe some in our newsroom did. And everyone kind of started speaking about it, and it took me a second to realize that my that my desk was kind of swaying. As one of our reporters was just saying, it did feel more of a stir than a jolt. Can you explain a little bit why that happens, why sometimes they feel different?
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends about which part of the earthquake shaking you're feeling. I'm assuming you're in downtown San Francisco.
Yes.
Maybe you said that. I'm sorry. So you're a little bit away, right? So this earthquake was just south of San Jose, or just sort of east of San Jose. And so in San Francisco, you obviously felt the shaking. But because you're a little bit further away, you probably didn't feel the first arriving P wave. You probably felt the slightly later arriving S wave, which is also the strongest shaking. And so if you're close to the epicenter of an earthquake, you feel that thump, which is a P wave arriving at your location. If you're further away, you're just feeling the sort of more of a sway, which is the S wave, more of a horizontal motion. So I think that's probably what you were experiencing.
Definitely. Talk to me just about the location that this hit, which fault line it may have hit on?
Sure. It looks to me like it's most likely it was on the Calaveras Fault. It's just immediately east of where the Hayward Fault, so it's where the two faults, the Hayward Fault and the Calaveras Fault, separate, just a little bit north of that point. And so it looks like it was probably on the Calaveras Fault rather than on the Hayward Fault.
Is that a pretty active fault line? Can you tell me when the last time was that we had one this big? Because I do feel like in recent months, probably in the last year, I don't think we've had a 5.1 magnitude quake in this region in any recent memory of mine. When was the last time we had a large earthquake on this fault?
So on the Calaveras specifically, I am actually not sure either. It is an active fault, so when we think about the likelihood of major damaging earthquakes on the faults in the Bay Area, the San Andreas Fault is sort of estimated at about 20–25% likelihood. The Hayward Fault is about 1/3, so about 33% likelihood, and the Calaveras Fault is down at about 25%. So it's definitely one of the more active faults in the Bay Area. And as to exactly when the last bigger sort of magnitude 5 earthquake on that fault was. I actually couldn't tell you off the top of my head. But just to comment, magnitude 5, obviously a lot of people felt this across the Bay Area, but this is not a big earthquake. This is really a very moderate-sized earthquake, and so it's sort of a good reminder for people that this isn't the big one. This isn't a big one even, but this is a reminder that we need to be ready because we do expect to have larger earthquakes that will do damage in the future.
Big ones, what would you classify a big one? Magnitude 6 and above?
Yeah, right, exactly. A magnitude 7 is the kind of earthquake that we need to be thinking about. The Loma Prieta earthquake back in 1989 was the last earthquake that was on that kind of scale. The Napa earthquake we had more recently, of course, back in 2014, that was a magnitude 6. Did a lot of damage in Napa, but really didn't do any damage beyond Napa itself. It's the magnitude 7 earthquakes that we know are coming that that are going to do damage across much of the Bay Area. So again, to me, this is a little reminder. It's a sort of jolt to think about what we're going to do when we have these more damaging earthquakes.
Definitely remind folks what to do in an earthquake. I mean, this one, again, like you said, it's not as large, but that magnitude of 5.1, I feel like we normally see about a 3.2, 3.4s, that sort of thing. Remind folks what to do. Obviously, we just had the great shakeout I believe that was last week, right? So it was a great reminder then. So just remind folks again what to do in an earthquake and what we need to do to prepare ourselves.
Absolutely. So whether you feel shaking or when you get an earthquake early warning, you get a message that it's coming, it's very simple. You drop, cover, and hold on. We know from past earthquakes that more than half of the injuries in these earthquakes are because people either fall over or something falls on you, like a book on a bookcase or a bookcase falls over. So that's why when you feel shaking or you get a warning, you drop, cover, and hold on. Very straightforward. In terms of preparedness, for me, that's what we should really take away from this event, is that, we get a warning, we should think about, now if this was a damaging earthquake, we would need to find our kids, we would need to meet up with family members, we would need to have a preparedness kit so that we can get home, first of all. When we get home, we need to have water for a few days, we need to have food for a few days, and think about how we're going to bring all of our family members together and where we're going to hang out for a few days while we wait for things to calm down. So that's the preparedness piece, is thinking about your family plan for a few days after a big earthquake.
Definitely, and this is the reminder we all needed. Richard Allen, director of the Berkeley Seismology Lab, thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad to know you are safe there. We do want to get back to Charles Clifford, joining us live again from San Mateo, a lot closer than here in San Francisco, but it seems we all kind of felt a similar thing. Charles?
Yeah, I've been texting with some of my friends sort of around the Bay Area. People in San Francisco obviously felt it. My wife felt it. People down in the South Bay felt it. Here in San Bruno, there was sort of initially a bit of a shaking, and I thought, well, maybe that's it. And then there was a pause, and then there was a 10-second, a much stronger earthquake. But again, it wasn't like the jolting, house-shaking earthquake that we've experienced in the past. This was like 10 seconds of stirring where there was kind of the ground was sort of doing this motion, and then it faded away. I did not feel the aftershock that a lot of people have talked about after that initial hit, but it was a very solid earthquake. And a lot of times when I feel an earthquake here and there's some light shaking, more than likely it's much bigger further away, and that was the case here. It's interesting to hear that this was on the Calaveras fault, not the Hayward fault. I don't know if that's good news. Certainly the Calaveras, the Hayward, there's a relationship there, and any big quake on those faults is of concern. But it sounds like maybe this was not, maybe it was very deep in the ground. It was strong, but it was deep in the ground, and it didn't cause a lot of damage or a lot of dramatic shaking up on the surface. We'll have to kind of wait and see how this plays out over the next hour or so.
Definitely. Chuck, thank you so much. I do want to note before we get to the next poster we're waiting on is Santa Clara Mayor Lisa Gilmore, but I just wanted to make sure folks know that BART trains, Caltrains, and VTA, they're all working at reduced speeds right now following this earthquake. So if you are headed out of the house right now to try and get somewhere, just know that our public transportation is working at reduced speeds for BART, Caltrains, and VTA. I do believe I'm joined now over the phone by Mayor Lisa Gilmore of Santa Clara. Mayor, can you tell me, is there any reports of damage in your city?